everyone, how's it going? You're watching Coerced. In today's video, I'll be exposing the Malaysian education system that I spent a significant amount of my time in my life growing up in. And by the end of this video, you'll realize that this whole education system in Malaysia is absolute farce and an absolute waste of time for any kid who goes into that system. And you know, the same thing actually holds true for many education systems around the world, because the education system that I grew up in Malaysia sucks so bad that it actually fostered my curiosity to venture out there to see if other countries had it the same or if they were better. Because one thing that Malaysians like to talk about is that the education system in Malaysia sucks so much, but the education systems in those other countries like Singapore and the US and the UK and all these Australia, all these other countries are much better. And what I've learned from having so many friends, having lived in so many different countries over the course of my life, is that the education systems in pretty much all countries suck nearly as much, just in their own ways. And it's really rich that there's a lot of Malaysians who like talking about how much the education system sucks in their country. Yet, throughout my so many years living on the internet, I've never seen a single person post either in text or in video or audio form how much and why the education system sucks. They just like to say, oh, it sucks. They make the kids not learn anything. But how? What do you mean by they don't teach the kids anything? Well, I'm here to give you the answer right here in this video. Now, I'm going to go over a bunch of details as to why the education system sucks. Now, the first thing in the Malaysian education system is the school year, right? So it was structured around something like 9 or 10 months of learning, and then the last 2 months would be like final exams. Now, the problem with that is that back in my day, you used to have final exams, and in addition to that, you also had these big government exams. So you had the one when you were 12 years old in standard 6 or primary 6. That was basically your high school entrance exam that would determine what sort of quality or grade of high school you would be able to apply to or get into. And the next exam would be at about age 15. That's PMR, as they call it in Malaysia, or as later they call it PT3. That happens when you're in Form 3 or your 10th year of school. And the last one would be the equivalent of the British O-levels called SPM. So these big exams, right, typically occupy the months of October, November. And these are only for the kids at those levels. So what do they do for the other kids who have since completed their final exams in mid to late October? There's still like a whole month of school left until December. My experience throughout both primary school, aka elementary school, and secondary school, which is high school in Western countries, is that the teachers actually just allow you to do jack squat in school. But most of the time, they'll still be taking your attendance. So in essence, what you're doing is being forced to go to school to do nothing because your final exams are over. There's no more syllabus to be taught, at least not for the rest of the school year. But the school holidays only begin sometime in like late November, early December. So the kids just go to school. They're allowed to bring board games. Yeah, that's right. I used to bring my chess set to school, and I used to challenge all the different kids to the point where we were actually betting on the outcome of the matches. I remember I was so good at chess at one point in my life that I actually was taking bets like, if you win this match, I'll give you 1 ringgit, which is equivalent to like 25 US cents. If I win this match, you give me 1 ringgit, which is 25 US cents. That happened throughout a lot of my years in primary school, and I distinctly remember in high school, right, in Form 1, Form 2, and even Form 3, there was this one teacher who was actually the head librarian teacher. He wasn't even like the discipline teacher or the headmaster of the school, called Mr. Wong. So what he would do is he was a quasi-dictator. He made himself as if he was the fucking principal of the school, and he kind of ran the show despite there being an actual principal or headmaster of the school. And what he did was he forced all the kids who weren't taking the major exams into basically a long-ass classroom. So we had these classrooms with these sliding connecting doors, and you could actually slide them open to create this kind of modular school hall, because the school was actually pretty new to the point where they didn't actually have a real school hall, so they had to resort to fixing together multiple classrooms. What he would do is he would force all the kids from Form 1, Form 2, and Form 4 into this school hall at the end of the year after our finals to watch fucking Indiana Jones every single day. That's right, we were going to school every single day from 7:30 in the morning all the way till the school bell rang at 1:50 p.m. watching Indiana fucking Jones. And the smart parents were the ones who allowed the kids to actually skip school and ditch classes. But a lot of parents didn't know any better, including my own, because they were under the impression that the school system sucked in Malaysia, but they didn't expect it to suck so fucking much that the kids were literally doing nothing at school. We weren't allowed to like bring like electronics and stuff like that. I had a laptop. I was one of the first kids to have a personal laptop in my life back in the day. We weren't allowed to have electronics. So the best way to entertain ourselves was really to betting on chess match outcomes and watching reruns of the various Indiana Jones that had come out from the first one all the way throughout the decades to the latest one at the time. So that happened for 2 whole months straight. Yeah, that's right. And I don't know how many kids ended up telling their parents about it, but no one really complained. So I'm not sure if they're even aware that this happened, which is one of the reasons why I'm making this video. And before I forget, since I did talk about the school hall, so the school was pretty new. They wanted a school hall, like a proper one, instead of those like interconnecting, 5 different classrooms to make like a long, massive ballroom style hall in the school building. And one thing that they did was a annual fundraiser through this, what they call Carnival Day. So this Carnival Day would be like kids creating different games. It would be basically a fun fair. And as part of this fun fair, there'd be these different games that you had to spend money on. They would have these little credits that they would try to raise money from kids for by getting the kids to go out there to their parents, friends, and family to purchase these tickets to this fun fair at school. Now, a lot of these people who would buy these tickets wouldn't actually go to the school to play those games at the fun fair. They would end up just giving those tickets back to the kids to have some fun. But one of the really, I guess, malicious things about this fundraiser is that it wasn't really a fundraiser per se, because when you talk about fundraiser, you're talking about donations. When you talk about donations, you're talking about voluntary payment of currency to the party that you want to show your goodwill to. No, this wasn't a donation, rather it was extortion from the kids. So what happened was Mr. Wong and his fellow teacher colleagues would distribute these 50 ringgit booklets, right? There'd be these little tickets that you could tear off worth 50 ringgit, which is equivalent to about $12 US, which was a lot of money at the time. They would force each and every one of the kids in school to solicit 50 ringgit worth of donations no matter what. And they would go to such lengths that they declared whoever didn't solicit the minimum required amount of 50 ringgit per kid would receive various punishments, from canings to scoldings, all that fun stuff. And so we were forced to basically beg, in a way, our parents, friends, and also relatives to like give us money to donate to the school fundraiser. Now, the school that I went to at the time had something like 5 classes in each form, and it was a pretty new school, so they only had until like Form 4. And doing the math over here, if anyone did their math, which obviously they haven't, because if they did the math, they would realize how much of a money embezzlement operation this whole fundraiser was, right? So 30 students per class, 5 classes per grade, 150 students per grade, multiplied by 3 full-size grades, which is 450 students. And there were, I think, like 2 classes in Form 4 that were about 60 students. So let's call it about 400 kids in the entire school at the time. And each kid was expected to raise 50 ringgit per student. Now, that's 20,000 ringgit per year that the fundraising Carnival Day was held. Now, the school kept growing in terms of size. So in the next year, they had something like a total of 600 students. And then the following year, I believe they must have hit like 800 or so. So that 20,000 ringgit in the first year that I was in the school would have gone to about 30,000 ringgit in the next 2 years. So they raised funds for literally the next 10 years, right? Amounting to something like at least 300 to 400, if not more, right? 300 to 400,000 ringgit, which is equivalent to like 100,000 US, only to build like this fucking tin roof over a basketball court with these like skinny ass metal poles holding up the roof. And that was the school hall that was built after literally a decade of fundraising. And keep in mind that this school hall didn't even have walls. And I just drove past that area a few years ago in Malaysia. And to this date, that school hall still doesn't have any fucking walls. Yeah, that's right, folks. They spent 6 figures to put up a tin roof with a few metal poles holding it up, on top of a concrete, rectangle that basically doubled as a basketball court. Yeah, that's right. So the money extorted from the kids, I wonder how much actually went to building said school hall, and how much of it actually went to like the teachers, those main characters like Mr. Wong, along with the people from the PTA, right, the Parent Teacher Association, also known as PIBG in Malaysia, right? So we had these big shots. One of these, the leaders of the PTA, the president, who was voted in miraculously every single year that his kid went to that school, was also a guy who probably knew guys in construction. So that's just the tip of the iceberg of the story. I want to get into more details over here. So throughout this entire schooling career of mine, there were multiple incidents from primary school and secondary school where it wasn't really the kids who loved to be truant and ditch classes. Quite often, we also had teachers ditching classes. Sometimes they would have like a valid excuse, like they'd be like out on like sick days and stuff like that. Sometimes the teachers get pregnant and go on maternity leave. That's completely acceptable. But there were a good number of times, I would say throughout the year, at least this would happen at least a dozen times a year, where teachers would just not show up for no reason at all, and the class monitor would try to go find that teacher, and they wouldn't be able to find that teacher, and none of the other teachers would be able to explain why that teacher wasn't in school that day, or if they were in school, where they were. So a lot of these classes were spent just doing nothing for the most part. And speaking of doing nothing, it wasn't exactly beneficial either if the teachers were present, because the syllabus that we were taught in school were basically these memorization pieces that we had to memorize and then regurgitate during the exam. Most memorably, when I was in the later years of my secondary school in Malaysia, we were forced in this moral class, right? That was actually a moral class in Malaysia. Actually, that's a thing since your first year of school all the way till the end. But to memorize these 50 moral values and then regurgitate them all during the exam. So the exam would ask you to have like moral values like being responsible, being caring and thoughtful for other people, being a helpful person. So you have all these different things, and not all of them were completely unique. So a lot of these were repetition, but you'll be asked questions during the exam as to like, you'll be given like a little paragraph to explain like, oh, there's this kid who saw this lady fall down. She's an elderly woman and he had to rush off to his school, but what should he have done and what moral values would he have demonstrated by helping this lady out? So you would answer, well, despite being late for school, he should help this elderly lady and see if she's okay, and by doing so he would display the moral value of being a thoughtful person. So if the answer sheet of the teacher, right, grading that exam said that the moral value that was applicable was really being a thoughtful and caring person, but the kid in the exam wrote being a thoughtful and responsible person, the kid will be marked wrong, right? So that whole response will be graded as wrong. So you get 0 credit for it because you didn't regurgitate the exact words that were taught in the textbook. My God, like just recalling this memory just makes me triggered as fuck. And there were a lot of other things as part of this grading and learning system inside the Malaysian education system that was complete bullshit. I remember realizing how much of a farce the grading system was. It wasn't about grading your essays to see how creative you were, if you were able to express yourself in a well articulated manner, if your vocab and grammar was right. I remember getting a B in my English class for the first fucking time in my life when I was in secondary school, and I was really, really confused because like, my native language is fucking English, right? On top of the English that is taught at a mediocre level in the Malaysian education system, my mom was actually thoughtful enough to actually send me to these proper English classes taught by these British people when I was a kid. And so in addition to that, she later taught English after she quit her toxic job where her boss was embezzling money from the company, right? That's a story for another video. Right? On top of that, she actually went to get certified to become an English teacher, and then she personally taught us English when we were since we were like 11 or 12 years old. So it wasn't that my English was bad, and I was so puzzled that I got a B in English. And there was this girl that I had a crush on back then. That's another tough story to tell for another time. But basically, I asked her because I was curious how she got an A. She went to Chinese school, by the way. So the stereotype is when you go to a Chinese school in Malaysia, your Mandarin is typically more powerful and your English typically sucks. But somehow she got an A. And I just asked her, and also I was just curious about her writing style and whatnot. And she gave me a paper, and I read like what she wrote in order to get an A. Her grammar was completely atrocious. Like her vocab was probably at the level of like a second grader in a native English speaking country like Australia or the UK. But miraculously, she got an A. How did she get an A, and how did I get a B with perfect grammar and vocab, you may ask? Well, she hit all the right keywords. She had somehow memorized these sample essays, which are really popular as well in the education system in Malaysia, right? The tutors outside of school and even sometimes the teachers in school will give kids like sample essays to read, and they wouldn't just read them, they would memorize these essays. I don't know how they do that because I have photographic, videographic memory myself, and even I can't memorize a goddamn 500-word essay and spit it out word for word, let alone 5 of those things. But somehow those Chinese-speaking kids managed to do that, and that's why she got an A, because she hit all the right keywords that the teacher grading the exam wanted to see based on the answers sheet that she was given by whoever is in the education ministry. That's how she got an A. I was too creative in my writing, too expressive in my thoughts, that I failed to hit the keywords and the points in the grading scheme provided to the teacher. Therefore, everything that I had written in the exam must have been wrong. No matter how right you are, by common sense, reality, whatever it is, you're wrong because it's not in the grading sheet of the teacher. That's how the Malaysian education system works. Now, at this point, I'm like 20 minutes into this video and I realized that it's not enough. So this is going to be a part 1 of how the Malaysian education system works, because there's so much shit to talk about over here. It's unimaginable. Like if you watch that other video, it's called like how I started my own business when I was like 11 years old or something like that. I'll link it down in the description below. There's a few naysayers who are like, how did you even start this business when you were 11 years old in school? Because the teachers barely teach anything. You have so much free time. Even if the teachers are physically there, I was often like zoning out inside my head. So I was like physically there, but mentally absent. I'm a daydreamer. I have some form of ADHD or something to both the benefit and detriment of myself. But I was daydreaming a lot. And one of the things that I did, as I described in that video, was I thought about how the school bookstore was so far away and we had a strict art teacher who forced us to bring our art supplies. And most of the class that I was in didn't bring their art supplies because they were just too bulky and they're lazy kids and stuff like that. So I was like, why don't I just sell them those drawing blocks and charge them money for it. And then later on, I was like, why am I selling it like in the same price as the bookstore, right? And why aren't I just charging more? I mean, I am making money off of these sheets, right? Sheet of drawing paper, but I could make even more money if I just put a little markup. You know, it's a fair price to pay for the convenience instead of having to walk like 10, 15 minutes to the bookstore there and back. Let me just do that. That's how I got those ideas, and I learned none of that in school. Right, so the education system in Malaysia is completely atrocious. Back in my day, and I think these days, sad to say, it's not very different. You know, from time to time, I try to go look at the books and stuff and see like what my kids have to eventually face when they get into school. And I'm looking at like all these like textbooks and reference books when I go to a bookstore in Malaysia, and I'm like, holy crap, this is the same bullshit that they had back in my fucking day. They're in for a treat. Or I could just pony up the tens of thousands of dollars to send them to a proper international school. That's another idea. Which is why I have to do shit like fucking trade for a living, because there's no employee job that is going to pay me enough for me to send my kids to a proper, international school in Malaysia that literally can cost, more per kid than the average salary that the average person makes in a white collar office job in Malaysia. I wanted to go into more content, but at this point, I don't know how many people will watch a 25-minute long video. So let's just keep it at that and see what the response rate to this video is. I hope you learned something, and I will see you all in the next video. Goodbye.